Last August, Daniel handed me a basket of tomatoes off 4 plants that weighed more than what I pulled off 8. Same soil, same weather. We live a quarter-mile apart. The only difference was a bucket of fermented kitchen scraps he feeds his plants every 2 weeks. Scraps you're probably throwing away right now. I'll be honest with you, for most of my life, I bought my plant food in bags and bottles exactly the way the garden centers wanted me to. They've got no reason to tell you the free version works better. Daniel never spent $1 on fertilizer in his life. Stick with me to the end, and I'll show you the one scrap he never adds to the bucket because it'll burn your roots instead of feeding them. I want to be straight with you about who taught us to think this way. It wasn't gardeners. It was the people who sell the bags. Here's the part most folks never learn. When the war ended in 1945, the country had a problem. We had factories all over America that had spent years making ammonium nitrate, the stuff that goes into munitions, into explosives. The war stopped and those plants needed somewhere to send all that nitrogen, so they pointed it at the backyard. They bagged it up, put a green label on it, and called it plant food. And over the next few decades, a steady drumbeat of advertising trained American gardeners to believe one simple thing, that feeding your garden means buying something. A bag, a bottle, a scoop, and a hose attachment. If it didn't come off a store shelf, it didn't count. I believed it too. For 13, 14 years on this property, I did exactly what I was told. Every spring, I drove to the garden center and bought my bags of 10, 10, 10. I bought the bottled feed you mix in the watering can, $30, $40, sometimes $50 a season. Every single season, like clockwork. And you know what I had to show for it. Weak tomato plants, soil so hard I could barely get a fork into it. And every August, the same war zone, pests crawling all over plants that never had the strength to fight back. A quarter-mile away, Daniel never spent $1 on any of it, not one. And last August, he handed me that basket. 4 plants outweighing my 8. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't think the garden centers are evil. They're not twisting anybody's arm. They're just selling what people will buy, and they've got no earthly reason to point you toward the free version sitting in your kitchen trash. Nobody's going to advertise the thing they can't put in a bag. So let me show you what's actually in Daniel's bucket. Here's the thing. It's not a fertilizer in any way you'd recognize from a store shelf. What Daniel keeps by his barn is a 5-gallon bucket of fermented kitchen scraps. The easiest way I know to describe it is this. It's sauerkraut. Well, not for your plants, same idea exactly. You're taking food scraps and letting the right kind of bacteria break them down without air, the same way a crock of cabbage turns into sauerkraut on a cold cellar shelf. Daniel never called it anything fancy. He just calls it the bucket. Now, what goes in it is the part that'll make you laugh because it's everything you've been carrying out to the trash. Vegetable peels, potato skins, carrot tops, the ends off your onions, fruit cores and scraps, apple cores, melon rinds, the soft tomato nobody wanted, coffee grounds, filter and all, crushed eggshells, leafy trimmings off your lettuce and your cabbage, even your spent tea bag and leaves. Daniel just keeps a little lidded pail on the kitchen counter, and whatever the meal didn't use, in it goes. When the pail's full, he layers it into the 5-gallon bucket and adds the one thing that isn't a scrap, about a half a cup of molasses or plain brown sugar, if that's what's in the cupboard. Then here's the trick most folks miss. He packs it down tight, really leans on it. You want to push the air out because air's the enemy of what you're trying to grow in there. He puts the lid on snug, sets the bucket in the shade alongside the barn, and walks away for about 2 weeks. That's it. No machine, no bottle, no bag with a 4-color label telling you it's plant food. And that right there is the first reason you'll never hear about this at a garden center. There's nothing in that bucket they could ring up at the register. Now here's where it gets interesting, because for years I didn't understand why a bucket of rotting scraps could possibly outperform a bottle that cost me good money. So I asked Daniel, and what he told me changed how I thought about feeding a garden. When you seal those scraps away from air and add a little sugar, you set the table for a specific kind of bacteria, lactic acid bacteria, the same lactobacillus that turns milk into yogurt and cabbage into kraut. Those bacteria go to work pre-digesting the scraps. They break everything down into nutrients that are already in a form a plant root can grab and use immediately. And along with those nutrients, you're pouring a living dose of beneficial microbes straight into your soil. That's the whole difference, and it's a big one. A bag of synthetic feed force feeds the plant directly. It's a jolt of salts that the plant takes up whether the soil wants it or not. Daniel's bucket does the opposite. It feeds the soil, and the soil feeds the plant. He's got a saying for it: feed the soil, not the plant. I must have heard him say that 20 times before it sank in. The microbes you pour in wake up the whole living network underground, and that network hands the nutrients to the plant on its own schedule, gently, the way nature actually does it. Because those nutrients are already pre-digested, the plant can use them almost overnight. That's the pop you see, a tomato plant that looks a little tired on Monday and looks like it stood up straighter by Thursday. A bag can't do that. A bag is feeding a plant sitting in dead, hard soil. Daniel's bucket is feeding a plant standing in living soil. That's why 4 well-fed plants on living soil will outproduce 8 starving plants on bag-fed dirt every single time. And it's exactly the kind of thing the folks selling you the bag have no reason to explain, because the day you understand it, you stop buying the bag. All right, let's keep going, because now I want to give you the actual numbers, how you take that bucket and turn it into a feeding. After about 2 weeks, you crack the lid and you'll have a layer of liquid down in the scraps. That liquid is the gold. You drain it off. Daniel just tips the bucket and catches it through an old kitchen strainer into a jar. And here's the part you have to get right, because this stuff is strong. You dilute it way, way down. 1 part liquid to 100 parts water. In real terms, that's about a capful, call it 2 tablespoons, into a full gallon of water in your watering can. That's all. Then you drench it right at the base of the plant, down where the roots are, not on the leaves. And you do that every 2 weeks through the growing season. That's the whole system. A capful per gallon at the base every 2 weeks. And the cost of it, let me be straight with you, is 0. Not low, 0. The scraps you were throwing away anyway, a little molasses, a bucket you already own. Daniel has never spent $1 on fertilizer in his life, and I mean that literally, not as a figure of speech. Meanwhile, I spent 13, 14 years buying bottles and bags before I ever walked over there with that 6-pack of root beer. Since I started feeding this way, my own tomato harvest has roughly doubled off the same beds. Doubled! And Daniel, who's been at it for 50 years and has soil to show for it, handed me that basket last August with 4 of his plants outweighing 8 of mine. Same soil type, same weather, same quarter-mile of Lancaster County. The bucket was the only difference. And you can't patent a cap full of fermented scraps, so nobody's ever going to run an ad for it. Now here's the part that took me a couple of seasons to really learn, and it's the difference between a bucket that works and a bucket that turns into a mess in your yard. The molasses isn't optional, and it isn't there for the plants. It's there for the bacteria. That sugar is the food that gets the lactobacillus going strong and fast, so they take over the bucket before anything else can. Skip the molasses and you're rolling the dice. With it, you're stacking the deck in favor of the good guys, and you'll know whether the good guys won by your nose. This is the test Daniel taught me, and it's better than any gauge. A bucket that fermented right smells sweet and sour, like a pickle barrel, a little yeasty, almost like sourdough. That smell means the lactic acid bacteria did their job, and the batch is good. But if you open that lid and it hits you with a putrid rotten egg stink that makes you step back, that batch failed. What happened is air got in, the wrong bacteria took over, and instead of fermenting, it just rotted. That one you don't put on your plants. You pour it on the compost pile and start over. There's one more thing to look at when you open it. A thin white film on the surface is perfectly fine. That's just a harmless yeast, and you can stir it right back in. But if you see fuzzy mold, the blue, the green, or the black kind sitting on top in patches, that batch is done. Toss it. Don't try to save it. And the last rule, the one that matters most for your plants, never, ever apply this stuff undiluted. That liquid is acidic and concentrated and straight out of the bucket. It'll burn a plant rather than feed it. Always the capful per gallon, always. Hold on to that, because it leads straight into the one thing Daniel told me he never, ever puts in the bucket. And I'll get to that in just a minute, because it's the part that catches almost everybody. This is the kind of detail you only learn standing next to somebody who's done it for 50 years. It's not printed on any label, because there's no label. Now, if what I'm walking you through here is making sense, and you're starting to see how the Amish do this differently than the way most of us were taught, feeding the soil instead of force-feeding the plant, then I want to point you to where the whole foundation is laid out. It's in my book, The 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol. Chapter 4 is called Building Pest-Proof Soil, and it walks through the soil food web in plain language, Daniel's compost pile that never stops, and exactly why feeding the living soil produces plants strong enough to shrug off pests instead of you fighting them all summer. If you're tired of the bagged and bottled treadmill and you want the whole system, not just one tip, it's $17 at backyardbillbooks.com. If you're watching on your TV, grab your phone and point the camera at the QR code on screen. Take your time finding it. I'll be right here. And if you're on a phone or a laptop already, the link's right there in the description below. All right? Let me come back to that bucket and that one scrap. Now, before I get to that scrap, I want to be straight with you about why a method this simple stays buried. Here's the thing. A bag of 10-10-10 is a beautiful business. You buy it, you use it up, and next season you buy it again. $30, $40, $50 every spring for the rest of your gardening life. That's recurring money. A bucket of fermented kitchen scraps is the opposite. It costs nothing, you can't patent it, and it makes your soil a little richer every single year. So you need it less, not more. No company can build a business on that. So nobody markets it. Go back to that 1945 marketing engine I mentioned. Those surplus nitrate plants weren't built to teach people how to make their own plant food. They were built to sell volume, and a method that costs zero and improves on its own is just a bad product from where they're standing. Now, I want to be fair. Synthetic fertilizer is fast. It's convenient. It's standardized. You know exactly what's in the bag. For a big commercial operation that needs predictable inputs across 1,000 acres, it has its place, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but here's the hidden cost most folks never hear. Those salts feed the plant directly while quietly starving the living things in your soil. So every season you lean on the bag a little more because the soil underneath is doing a little less. That's a dependency, not a solution. And here's where it gets personal. Every bag I bought for 15 years was money I never needed to spend on a product that was making my soil weaker the whole time. Daniel's family skipped that whole cycle. They never bought in, so they never got hooked, and their soil only gets darker and richer every year. That's the part the label can't tell you. All right, now that's scrap. The one Daniel never lets near the bucket. It's citrus, orange peels, lemon rinds, lime, any of it. And there's a reason, and it's a good one. It comes down to two things. First, citrus rind is full of an oil called D-limonene. That oil is antimicrobial. It kills bacteria. And the whole point of this bucket is to culture a specific bacteria, the lactic acid kind, the same ones that make sauerkraut. Drop citrus peels in there and the oils go to war with the very microbes you're trying to grow. The ferment never takes. Instead of that sweet, sour pickle smell, you get a putrid, rotten mess and you lose the whole batch. Second, and this is the part that ties back to what I told you about never applying it undiluted, those same rind oils and that concentrated citrus acid survive right into the liquid. So even if the batch somehow ferments around it, when you pour it at the base of a plant, the oils and acid strip and burn the fine little feeder roots. The exact roots that drink up your nutrients. You'd be torching the dinner table instead of setting it. So Daniel's rule is simple. Citrus goes in the slow compost pile, never the bucket. Out in the open pile, it breaks down gently over months, no harm done. In a sealed bucket with no air, it's poison to the process. I asked him how he knew that, and he just shrugged. His father had ruined a batch with orange peels once, 50-some years ago, and that was that. That's the kind of thing you only learn from someone who's done this his whole life. It's not printed on any label because there's no label to print it on. Before I let you go, I want to come back to one more thing. Everything I showed you today, feeding your soil for free with what you were tossing in the trash, that's the lesson that turned my whole garden around. And it started one evening when I walked over to Daniel's with a 6-pack of root beer and finally stopped trying to buy my garden in bags and bottles. That story and the moment everything changed is chapter 1 of my book, How I Learned to Stop Fighting My Garden. It's everything Daniel showed me over 35 years, organized into a 30-day protocol you can start this weekend. $17 at backyardbillbooks.com. If you're on the TV, grab your phone and scan the QR code on screen at Pest-Proof. No rush. Take your time finding it. And if you're on a phone or laptop, the link's right down in the description. So that's how Daniel pulls heavier baskets off 4 plants than I ever got off 8. Not with a single dollar of fertilizer, but with a bucket of fermented kitchen scraps and a soil that feeds itself. And now you can do the same thing. You can feed your garden for free with the peelings and grounds and trimmings you were carrying out to the trash this morning. Daniel's been doing this for 50 years. His father did it before him, and on a few hundred Amish farms across Pennsylvania right now. That's just what happens to the kitchen scraps. They go in the bucket, not the bin. It's not a secret to them. It's just Tuesday. Try it on a single bed this season. Build 1 bucket, feed 1 row, and watch what happens by August. Then drop a note in the comments and let me know how it went. And if you want to know how Daniel waters that whole garden without ever turning on a hose, well, that's another thing most of us were never taught. But that's a story for the next one. I'll see you in the next one.